Hello everyone, welcome to the episode 37 of SoLeadSaturday. The guest we have today, Oren Eini, is a frequent blogger at inde.com, has over 15 years of experience in the development world, who strongly focuses on the Microsoft and .NET ecosystem. He is an internationally acclaimed presenter appearing at DevTech and many more progressive .NET conferences, sharing his knowledge via conferences and written works such as DSLs in Boo, Domestic Specific Languages in .NET, published by Manning, and the deep dive into RavenDB book, Inside RavenDB. He remains dedicated and focused on architecture and best practices that promote quality software and zero friction development. So we will not wait and let's welcome him and hear more about his passion towards the development and how did he find his passion and managing to lead that over 15 years. So welcome Oren, really appreciate your time on the show.
Thank you very much for having me.
So to begin with, when I came across your profile, you worked for Israel Defense Forces as an officer, and
Yes,
then after you move towards the development field, like software engineering side. So now you are a founder and CEO of RavenDB. How did how did that journey happen, and what do you enjoy the most?
we have mandatory army duty in Israel,
Uh-huh.
and I think I'm, I don't know when I started loving computers.
Uh-huh.
I don't recall that far. I remember getting an XT machine, and I think I was 6, 7, something like that.
Mhm.
But I always knew that I wanted to work with computers as
Mhm.
my work and my hobby, my passion, all of that. And then I got to the army,
Mhm.
and there is an interesting phrase in English that is called the I'm probably killing the word, but exigencies of the service, which
Mhm.
basically means that whatever the army needs, this is where you go.
Oh, okay. Mhm.
And because of that, I got to the army and I said I really like to work on computers, and they
Mhm.
sent me to prisons. I
Mhm.
spent 4 years in prison. I started out as a as a prison guard.
Mhm.
My last job at the army was a prison commander,
Mhm.
and I worked on multiple prisons during that time frame.
Mhm.
Uh, Small recommendation for anyone who is listening to that: don't go into prison. Don't
Mhm.
go into prison as a prisoner, as an inmate. Don't go into prison as somewhere to walk in.
Mhm.
It seriously messes up with your mind. But you ask how is it
How
affecting
did
me?
that journey happen? That
Yeah,
you
and
transformed your career. Actually, you were
yeah,
completely in the different world,
mhm,
and you moved towards the software development, and now you like
yeah.
own your own firm. So how did
Try to imagine
yeah?
I'm 18, 19 years old,
Mhm.
a stereotypical nerd.
Mhm.
My idea of talking to people is through ICQ,
Mhm.
and suddenly they put me in a place where I have to talk to people. I
Mhm.
have to also talk to some fairly unpleasant people,
Mhm.
and I have to get them moving and working and doing the things that must be done.
Mhm.
And effectively, my entire term in the army
Mhm.
was all about people and working with people, understanding people, and understanding that sometimes you can't help some people. And there isn't any amount of money you could pay me today to go
Mhm.
through that again. But the person who went into the army was a kid,
Mhm.
and and the person who left the army was an adult,
Mhm.
and they had very different mindset
Mhm.
about a lot of things. Just to give you some idea, at age of 20 or 21, I was the uh, second in command in a company,
Mhm.
and under me I had 480 people, inmates,
Mhm.
that were my responsibility.
Mhm.
if I was working in the civilian prison, that position is usually filled with someone with 50 to 20 years of experience, age 35 to 40 at the minimum. And but I had all of that responsibility. I had all of those requirements, and I had to match whatever they were doing. And after I got off the army and I sat down and really thought about that, okay, I have a challenge, but I already dealt with bigger challenges and I could handle them. Maybe not in the ideal manner, but I dealt with them. When I started my company, and just to give you some background, I after the army I went and was a software consultant for about 2.5 years, and then I went and become independent consultant in February of '08. Now, if you remember the timeline, there was a minor financial crisis at the time. And I remember sitting down and doing the worst case analysis. Okay, I'm going to go and work on my own. And I have to do things such as issue invoices, make sure that I get the money, a whole bunch of other stuff like that. What are the worst case scenario? And I planned in advance. So here is how I'm going to fail. And the situation was that, okay, if I'm going to fail, it's going to be set me back a year or two. I would lose some of my savings. I would have to go back and become an employee somewhere, but I wouldn't end losing my shirt. I wouldn't end up with, having to sell my house, all of those sort of things. And I think that those two things, uh, I've dealt with harder stuff before, and planning explicitly how to fail were very helpful.
Okay.
I remember getting my first employee. That's 2011. And my assumption was that, okay, this is now I've been an officer, I've commanded people in the past, but commanding people in the army and actually having employees are two very different things. And I remember sitting down and thinking about that and knowing, okay, I have too much work to be able to do it on my own. And I was very worried about taking on the responsibility for another employee. So I actually waited for quite some time before I had enough cash at hand to pay this new employee for 3 months, even if I had no further income. And for people who want to build companies and businesses, having cash at hand is amazing. Now, it means that come the 4th of the month, you don't have to figure out how you can hustle for salaries or rent or those sort of things. And I was very conservative about the way that I built things. And the fact that I had, okay, this guy has 3 months of salaries and it's in the bank. If I have no money coming for 3 months, I'm still okay. But I only got this employee after the monthly revenue was enough to actually to also pay for him. So that meant that this money in the side become a general nest egg. And if I had some unexpected expense, oh, the car had a puncture, and the shop says that we also need to replace the brakes. Okay, it's not going to break the bank. It doesn't mean that I have to go and have a conversation with the clerk in the bank about, okay, how much money can I get right now? Those sort of things. And I think that help a lot to for my peace of mind overall. The downside of doing things this way is that it meant that we were constrained in our growth. So you typically have people that you hear about startups that they grow by 100, 200 employees in a year. We went from one employee in 2011, and right now we are about 30, 35.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, so it took me a decade to go there, but throughout this process, for the
Mhm,
most part, I didn't have to uh, uh, lose sleep about how am I going to make the salary, how I'm going to make the rent.
mhm,
And that's a lot of that also depend on what it is that you're trying to do.
yeah. So
I
very,
yeah,
very interesting points that you mentioned actually, and that purely shows that why you are leading your area of interest, because you mentioned that you're never afraid of the failures, or it's very important to take the risks, and and one more important aspect which I can see in the business, which is like finding an opportunity and building the business. So thank you so much for sharing. And moving towards our next question, it is about your defense forces job. So do you have any kind of memory where you learned a lot and you would like to share that specific experience? You already mentioned a couple of things actually from your prior work experience with the defense, but
the
anything specific?
I don't know if I can quantify
Mhm,
quantify it,
mhm,
but I told you I worked in prison. My whole day
mhm,
was about 1 second. The dog is annoyed. My whole day was about talking to people and getting them where they were supposed to go and doing the
oh,
things that they were supposed to do.
mhm.
And
That's great.
that meant, yeah, and that meant that I had to develop
Mhm,
absolutely against my will, by the way,
mhm,
uh, some form of people skill. Now, if you ask my wife, I have no people skill at all, but
mhm,
she didn't know me back then.
mhm,
Uh, but I think that's the most important thing, the uh, getting a feel
mhm,
for people. And for the most part, I think that looking back at the decade plus of running this company,
mhm,
uh, I'm very happy with 95 of the people that I hired, that I worked with,
mhm,
and I absolutely think that I can credit uh, my time in the army and all of the force interactions I had to that.
mhm. Yeah. And talking about RavenDB actually, would you like to share more about it, like how it functions? And as you already mentioned, that you've grown a lot actually from 2011.
Mhm.
But anything specific that how day-to-day job
Yeah.
in your firm looks
So
like, or something like
RavenDB is a document database. It's
that? Mhm,
actually by now a multimodal database that allows you to store data in JSON,
mhm,
store time series information, binary data. It is transactional, distributed, and by far the most important thing that it does is it gets out of your hair. That's
mhm,
the reason it exists. In 2010, 2008, 9, I was working on that on RavenDB,
mhm,
and the reason I was working on it was because you are my clients at the time had a lot of trouble using relational databases
oh,
because of the complexity of the system.
mhm,
And I looked at other NoSQL databases at the time, and it was like juggling knives.
mhm,
Everything works just fine as long as you don't miss anything. And if you miss anything, then you're picking your fingers off the floor.
mhm, mhm,
And what was trying to do is to provide a database that gets out of your hair. 1 second.
mhm,
Yes. And sorry, she's being very annoyed. I wanted to create a database that gets out of your hair,
mhm,
that does the right thing. And for the most part, I think that we did it. RavenDB has a lot of features that don't exist anywhere else. It is
mhm,
able to understand what you're doing in your system and adjust automatically what's going on. And looking So you asked about what I do or how
Yes,
do we,
how
yeah,
the typical day in your firm looks like, or what does it facilitates?
yeah, that depends on the role. For me, this is more at this point mostly about managing the business and the direction of where we're going, as well as look at some of the uh, more complex technical aspects.
Mhm,
Oh, there is this big new features, then I would be involved in the design and maybe some part of the implementation.
mhm,
Uh, there are some more complex features or more complex production issues that
mhm,
need more insight, those sort of things. Technical account, I came into my position from the technical track. So
mhm,
I wrote a significant portion of the code base of RavenDB. And I'm still very familiar with almost every part of the system. At the same time, I have team members that have been in the company for 10 or 9 years.
mhm,
So the amount of uh, organizational knowledge that we have is very high and very helpful.
mhm,
Because, oh, yeah, 6 years ago we had to write this line of code because there was a problem in
mhm,
this situation, those sort of things. Uh, for we are working in for the developer, the employees in the company, we're working in a mostly agile format with 2 week sprints.
mhm,
We have the team leader who are planning their sprints and then go up for approval, and then they're basically free for the duration of the sprint to do whatever needs to be done.
mhm.
And that's the half of it.
Okay, okay. Thank you for sharing. And moving towards one of the important aspect of your profile, as I mentioned already earlier in the introduction as well, that more about your blogging actually. That you blog daily for IND at
Yeah.
Ryan
Hmm.
since 2004, which is like
Hmm.
almost 15 plus years now,
Yeah.
and you have almost like more than 10K readers. Tell us
Hmm.
more about it, and why do you think blogging is important? That would be an interesting thing to know,
There
audience.
are
Yeah.
two major reasons why I blog. The first one is that I like to write,
Mhm,
and I find that sitting down and writing in many cases is very helpful to understand the problem because you have to
mhm,
put it in terms that someone else would understand. And that means that you have to explore avenues and hidden assumptions that you had. Another thing is that this is really good for organizational knowledge
mhm,
because now I can go and say, okay, I remember building this, but it was 6 years ago. I have no idea what actually happened in my mind. I can go to a blog post and read that and understand what's going on. It
mhm,
is also very helpful for knowledge sharing inside the company. So those are all of the things that are helpful to write in general.
mhm,
What is really important is that this is also very helpful in terms of marketing
mhm,
because you have people who are sitting there and seeing, okay, here is a feature, but here are also all of the other things that we do with these features that makes a difference. And here are all of the things that you need to consider, and that creates a brand, that creates
mhm,
a trust in the product that we build,
mhm,
and it also creates a community of people who are familiar with what we're doing that can assist. A great example of that is in 2017, I think. I posted about, oh, I want to add a transparent data encryption to RavenDB,
mhm,
and here is how I'm going to do that. And almost immediately, I started getting feedbacks from readers that says, "Oh no, this is horrible. What you're doing is very bad. It's going to cause you issues, or a bunch of other stuff like that."
mhm,
And they pointed me in the right direction. They told me, "Okay, here are all of the things that you should also take into account," and that was amazing. Almost 6 months, a year later, we went through a security audit and we passed mostly because I didn't do silly things because I had outside review. And if
mhm,
you think about that, the the cost of having someone come and review at the rate that we're going is very high.
Mm-hmm.
But if I'm just throwing in the blog, there is a very good chance that it will run into someone who knows something about it, and then we can have a discussion. And I
Mm-hmm.
found that incredibly valuable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's great actually that you have a lot of like huge community who are reading your blogs. So that's really great, and definitely I would encourage people as well, audience, to check out his blogs. Moving towards our next question is about building a business around any open source software. So what are all things come under it?
Um, I have a series of blog posts on this very topic, but I can say that about most things.
Mhm,
Uh, the hardest thing about open source projects, about making money from open source, is
mhm,
why would you pay me? I
mhm,
already gave you, I gave you everything.
mhm,
Why would you pay?
mhm,
Um, and there are many different schemes to make money from open source. There is the charge for support. There
mhm,
is the open core where you have some open stuff, but the most important stuff are hidden.
mhm,
And my approach for that was to say, you know what? I'm going to put a price in the website. And
mhm,
I'm going to treat this project as if it was a commercial project, but
mhm,
all of the code is going to be on the in the open and under a OSI approved license. And the idea is simple. If you want to run RavenDB, you
mhm.
can go and get the source from GitHub, compile it, deploy it yourself, and you don't have to pay anything.
Yeah.
But we are a database. We're deployed in professional settings, and in
Mhm,
almost all of those cases, the users want to run the verify system. They want to have
mhm,
someone to call to if they need to. So from my perspective, just okay,
mhm,
the source is out there. I mean, I make the source available. It's not like you have to stretch.
mhm,
But from my perspective, if you want to use RavenDB and you come to us, okay, here is the quote, here is how much money it's going to cost, and that's about it. And I think that has been very useful from our perspective because it
mhm,
means that we have the ability to look at the software
mhm,
as a whole. So one of the things that is often problematic
mhm,
in projects such as Open Core or that use a support model
mhm,
is the kind of incentives that they have.
mhm.
If I make the software too easy to use,
Yeah.
well, that means that no one is going to pay for support.
Yep. Yep.
So I have an incentive to make it more complex. If
Mhm,
I'm going to with open core model, well, I have very problematic balance. I
mhm,
want to give is enough in the open system for you to come in, but not enough so you wouldn't buy. And in many cases, you see features such as security not
mhm,
making the cut into the open core.
mhm,
And for that's one of the reasons why you see things like Elasticsearch being so often hacked. And I'm saying
mhm,
hacked in this manner because it's not hacked if you left the door open and put a welcome sign.
mhm,
Because the security parts of Elasticsearch is often in
mhm,
the commercial parts. People don't use that, and they just end up with a server that is open to the public.
mhm. Okay, that's great actually. And you already answered my question actually. I was about to ask, like, when we think about the open source like culture, it's very hard. It might be more competitive compared to when we think about the business, when we are dealing with the open source, right? But you already mentioned that, how you make the business out of it. So thank you so much for sharing. And moving towards our next question in the line is non-technical aspect, like what non-technical aspects are important when it comes to building a business or having your
Mar-
own company.
Marketing, sales,
Mm,
and the profit and loss report.
mhm,
So the hardest thing is not to come up with an idea.
mhm,
Ideas are a dime a dozen.
Mm-hmm.
The hardest thing is to get someone else to pay for your ideas.
Mm.
And
Yep.
sometimes the thing that they were willing to pay for
Mm-hmm.
are stupid and boring and annoying, which is why they're willing to pay for that.
Yep.
And sometimes, the grandiose stuff, the things that is amazing and interesting and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's interesting. I would love to see that, but there's no money in that.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that the most interesting, that most important non-technical part, and in many cases more interesting than technology, is how do you get and maintain customer and sales.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and beyond that, I think that's really important. The finance, knowing how much money do I have,
Mm-hmm.
what is at what point do I have to start worrying?
Mm-hmm.
If I'm making $10 a month but I'm spending eight,
Mm-hmm.
I'm good. If I'm making eight and spending 10, I'm not so good. And is this something that uh, is it seasonal? August is a very bad month for sales in some cases.
Mm-hmm.
So I have to know that and be prepared for that in advance, so I will keep money from other months to go forward.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I think that those three are the most important things that you have to do.
Yeah.
Beyond that, there are a lot of other stuff, people skills, HR.
Mm-hmm.
We had a lot of struggles moving from a 10 people company to 20 people company, because at that point the structure was completely different.
Mm-hmm.
But those are late stage stuff.
Mm-hmm.
First thing that you need to understand is, how do I make sales and how do I pay the salary?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So thank you so much for sharing, and that is definitely very insightful to know the audience. And moving towards one more thing is that growth of your company, that you've grown for from like a one employee starting with, and then now you have like a 35 plus. So what are the real challenges do you see when you look back, that when it comes to the growth of any employer, and how to overcome those? I'm definitely sure that a lot of people in the audience, like who are aspiring entrepreneurs, that would be useful for them. So what would be the real challenges actually when it comes to the employer growth?
When I had 5 people in the office,
Mm-hmm.
everything went through me,
Mm-hmm.
because I was the focal point.
Mm-hmm.
When I had 10 people in the office,
Mm-hmm.
almost everything went through me.
Mm-hmm.
When I had 50 people in the office, almost everything went through me, and I couldn't manage that.
Ah,
I
okay.
was like a butterfly, moving from one place to the next and trying to keep track of what everything is going.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that I kept being the hub of all of the decisions for too long.
Mm-hmm.
And at some point, we restructured the company and we put some hierarchy in place.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that uh, the the stage that you do it in
Mm-hmm.
is really important, because if you do it too early, you introduce hierarchy and bureaucracy and no no improvement in efficiencies. But
Mm-hmm.
if you do it too late, then there are inefficiency from having, in my case, everything had to go to me, and that was really hard.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's one of the most important things that happened to the company.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Mm-hmm.
this doesn't tend to happen if you're already, if you're at 30 people and you go to 70, then
Mm-hmm.
it's just expand the existing structure. But
Mm-hmm.
from 520, then you have a different, completely different structure in the company.
Mm. Okay. Yeah. That makes sense, and definitely that is also useful actually. So moving towards, like next question is that your organization work in a distributed team, right? So what are the pros and cons having the distributed system, like a distributed teams?
Uh, we have a, we had, that's annoying.
Mm-hmm.
And right now, we are absolutely distributed. Everyone works from home because of the COVID.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Before that, we had 2 central hubs one in Israel, one in Poland, and a bunch of other people who are scattered around. The advantage of a distributed team is that you have very little um, you have very little not breaking point walls that you have to go through at the same time. The most trivial example, the Polish team and the Israeli team don't have the same holiday calendar. Um, but it means that a lot of the communication that we have between the team members is written, which means that we have a record of that. It means that there is huge incentive to have a knowledge sharing in the organization because I'm already writing it down. I might as well write it in the issue instead of in the email. And so 3 years later, I can come and see the discussion. The disadvantage are that there are some things that brainstorming in particular or some of the more complex problems are better handled face to face. From experience, Skype or Zoom or something like that can help quite a lot in this regard, but uh, there is a lot of advantages of getting up and going to grab some coffee and then pulling someone who just happened to be there. Hey, I have this and this so and so issue and stuff like that. There's also the interpersonal communication. I think that is much better when you have on-premise team rather than the distributed one. Other aspect is that I think that going to the office is valuable on itself versus working from home. If only because usually the dog doesn't interrupt me in the office. But yeah, that's it.
Yeah, yeah. And do you think that when you have the distributed team, that you mentioned that you have some like communication overseas as well, right? So do you juggle between finding the time, like time zone difference, when it comes to the distributed environment?
For some of our team, so for most of the teams, there is 1 or 2 hour difference depending on the daylight saving time. But we also had teams in the States, which is 9 to 6 hours difference. We had people working with us from Australia, which is 11 hours difference. Uh, in some cases, you adjust and you schedule times that are inconvenient for both sides. Other cases, you do a lot more stuff through email.
Yeah.
But again, having a conversation in sometimes means that you can close an issue within 10 minutes, but through email, this takes 10 days, stuff like that.
Yep, yep.
So even if you're working with remote and most of the work is done through text, there is still a lot of value in having actual conversations.
Okay. Thank you so much for sharing. And already in your introduction, I mentioned that you are into the Microsoft ecosystem, like dealing with .NET, SQL. So, which specific language, actually, programming language, do you prefer always, or do you want?
My default language would be C Sharp. I've been working on that since the alpha stages, which means that I'm closing to 20 years of work in this language. Uh, we also have a, we also have code bases in Python, Go, C++, C, Node.js, Java, across the board. And uh, in some cases, there is a qualitative difference in the knowledge that we have about, we built RavenDB in C Sharp on the .NET platform. So we have a huge amount of experience and insight into how it goes. We built the client for RavenDB in Python, for example, and we have a good grasp of how it goes, but the amount of knowledge that I have about the intricacies of the Python GC versus the .NET GC is very different. I have a very good understanding of one, and I sort of know how that one works. But yeah, but in general, the programming language doesn't matter so much as the environment and how everything comes together, I think.
Yeah, yeah. And it truly shows you are leading your area of interest and in managing well. So, what is your leadership style, and any specific leader that you always follow or admire?
Uh, I like to have people discuss what they think, and in many cases, I would rather have a conversation before making decisions. At the same time, there are some cases that it's better to say, "Oh, I understand that from your perspective, uh, this feature should go like this, but I think that uh, my vision for this feature is like this, so we're going to do that." I try to at least hear and explain
Mm-hmm,
my reasoning, but in the end, um, the decisions that are made in the company has to align with the way that I want to take this company. In terms of leaders, I love it when we have when the reasoning is outlined properly,
mm-hmm,
and it's clear what's going on, how things are going.
mm-hmm,
Uh, I will actually reverse that and say that I'm more on the leaders that I don't like. At one point in the army, I had 9 different people who could tell me what to do,
mm-hmm,
and at some point, I had 9 different orders, different ones, on what to do.
mm-hmm,
I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing at this point,
mm-hmm,
and I don't want to go to that level.
mm-hmm,
So I think that negative impression of leadership is most of what I see.
mm-hmm. Okay, thank you so much for sharing. And moving towards the guidance, actually, so any online books or courses that you would like to recommend to the audience who are looking to build their career towards the development side?
That really depends on where you want to take your career.
Mm-hmm,
Uh, I have this book that it's called Database Internals,
mm-hmm,
and it's a really good book to understand how database work,
mm-hmm,
and from the inside, not from the outside.
mm-hmm,
Uh, and I think that's a and this is literally a book that I have within Amrich for myself.
mm-hmm,
If you want to be a if you want to go in the technical route, and then understanding how things work below the surface. That means that here's another example. I'm working in .NET, so I have here a book called Pro.NET Memory Management
mm-hmm,
by Connor Kokosa,
mm-hmm,
and that is 1,000+ pages that explain how memory works in .NET, and as well as a whole bunch of other details about how .NET works. Uh, it's not mandatory to read it, but it can be incredibly helpful.
mm-hmm,
Uh, Other books that are really important, the Dinosaur book that talks about operating system, any of Tannenbaum books about operating systems or networking.
mm-hmm,
In general, figure out where you want to be, and
mm-hmm,
then read books that are 2 or 3 levels below where you are.
mm-hmm,
Because at that point, you will understand how things are actually working. For the same reason, if you mostly work in a managed language, .NET, Java, stuff like that, spend a week or two writing in C, not C++, C, so you understand what is happening behind the scenes.
mm-hmm,
Uh, Beyond that, and much more important than just reading books, if you, again, for the technical people, go and read code. There is a wealth of open source projects out there. If you're working on React, sit and read through the code base of React, and then go and look at Vue.js and look at multiple solutions to the problem. And
mm-hmm,
that way, you have a good understanding of the problem space. You understand, okay, I know not only how this works, but why and what are the constraints that people have to go through. One of my hobbies is to go and sit and read through a code base, and I read through the code base in alphabetical orders on the files, which is absolutely not how the system is typically structured. But what it gives me a puzzle. I have some of the pieces in my head about how this project is working, and as I read more, I understand more and more about what's going on. But at the same time, I have to make speculations. Oh, you're doing this here. This probably means that over there you have to take into account this and this. And some cases I'm right, some cases I'm not. But I find that this is very helpful as an exercise to expand my capabilities.
Okay. So thank you so much and really appreciate your time to be the guest on my show. And it was really very insightful to know more about you as well as your career journey and your firm RavenDB. So I think audience is going to enjoy this episode as well. So as I always say, until we meet, happy leading. Let's lead together. Stay safe. Bye for now.
Goodbye. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much.